This is part 2 of the Naomi Fee case. This episode talks about some horrendous abuse to young children and has strong language, so listener discretion is advised before listening on. In part 1, we covered the first 3 weeks of the trial, with Naomi and Rachel's mum taking to the stand, as well as Dr. French, who had carried out the post-mortem on Liam, before the jury members heard the pre-recorded interviews with 2 7-year-old boys who also had been in the care of Naomi and Rachel and the horrendous abuse they had suffered. At the end of part 1, were you able to keep emotion out of your feelings and just concentrate on the horrendous details? I actually had an email from Katrina who suggested this case, and she said that even though she was familiar with the tragic case, it still brought a tear to her eyes. Being a juror in this case, and not allowing your emotions to cloud your decision-making, must have been such a hard ask. In a later episode, I will tell you just how it affected one of the jurors on this case. But back to week 4 of the trial. After hearing the 2 weeks of the pre-recorded interviews and the court adjourning for the weekend, it reconvened again on Tuesday the following week, where Elizabeth Wilson took to the stand. Elizabeth had become friendly with Rachel Fee when they both kept horses at a nearby farm. She said she had been aware that Liam had been attending a nursery. However, Rachel had told her that she had stopped Liam going. She was asked, "Did Rachel give you a reason why it stopped?" To which she replied, "Because they had phoned social services. There were a few issues and they called social services on them, I think." She went on to say that she had bumped into Naomi and Rachel with Liam in the buggy outside a shop on an occasion after Liam had been stopped from going to the nursery, and she said he had a blanket over his head. She was asked what Rachel had said to her about this, and Elizabeth said Rachel had replied, "Don't speak to or look at him because he'd play up or it would upset him," or something to that effect, just because she claimed he was autistic. Elizabeth went on to describe another occasion when she had been giving Rachel a lift in her car when Rachel's phone had rang. She said, "I think it was the health visitor. I think Liam was due for a checkup," and she just said she wasn't going to answer it. She didn't want to take Liam down because he'd scratched himself and he had a few marks on his feet. Elizabeth said she'd said to Rachel at the time, "Just answer the phone and take him down. If there's no problem, just take him." On another occasion, she said Rachel had cancelled a lift she had arranged to take one of the boys to the hospital because he had blisters on his feet, which had turned to gangrene. Rachel had told Elizabeth that the injuries were the result of tight plimsolls, saying that Rachel had later shown horrific photographs of the injuries to others at the stables. Elizabeth lastly mentioned that on another occasion, Rachel had told her that she'd washed one of the boys' mouths out with washing liquid or soap after he swore at her. Next onto the stand was childminder Heather Farmer. Heather first looked after Liam at her home in July 2012 until January 2013, when she could no longer look after Liam. Heather told the jury that in the 5 years she'd been a registered childminder, Liam had been the only child she'd had concerns about. She said by Christmas 2012 she'd begun to have serious concerns about Liam's welfare, and so had contacted the Scottish Childminding Association for advice because she felt that something wasn't right. "I thought somebody was hurting Liam." Heather became emotional and broke down in tears on the stand when saying that she'd been unable to sleep. She'd been so worried about Liam, and that Liam had gone from a happy and content 11-month-old child when she first started looking after him, saying he was walking, talking, interacting with other children, singing and playing with toys, but had become very withdrawn, quiet, and didn't want to interact with other children, going on to say that he seemed sad. Heather said she kept a diary during her time looking after Liam and noted that he had turned up with scratches and bruises to his face, a bruised forehead and legs, and a black eye on a significant number of occasions. When Heather had brought this up with Liam's mum, Rachel, she had said that Liam had fallen out of his cot and that she had found him on numerous occasions asleep on the floor of his room. This concerned Heather in itself, and so upon asking the Scottish Childminding Association for advice, and them advising her to contact the Care Inspectorate, she did this, and reported that she was concerned that his mum had not heard him fall, that she was not certain that there was anything sinister about the injuries, but at the very least she's concerned he might not be properly supervised. Also taking to the stand was Patricia Smith, who also took her child to Heather to mind at the same time as Naomi and Rachel took Liam. She said that months following Heather not being able to care for Liam any longer, she too had seen Naomi, Rachel, and Liam in his buggy outside a shop and had gone to say hello. She said, I peeped into the buggy to see Liam, and I noticed he had a blanket over his head, and I apologised and said I didn't realise he was sleeping. Rachel said he was awake, and at that point I felt something was wrong. She was asked by the prosecution what she felt was wrong, to which she replied, the stillness. There was something deathly about it. He was too still to be sleeping. It was very strange. She said she had been upset about this meeting, feeling that perhaps Liam was drugged or dead. She said when she returned to her office, she called social services to report her concerns. Next on the stand was the Sunshine Nursery manager, Kimberly Trail, where Rachel and Naomi had placed Liam from March 2013, following Heather being no longer able to care for Liam at her home due to her concerns for his welfare. They subsequently removed Liam from the Sunshine Nursery in June 2013, following concerns about Liam's welfare being made to social services, following a string of injuries being found on Liam over the 3 months he was with them, of which nursery staff had used diagrams to record Liam's injuries. The diagrams showed bruising to his bottom, a swollen lip, and bruising to his ears and nails. Kimberly told the court how frightened Liam had looked when his mum Rachel came to pick him up from nursery, going on to say that she had never seen a similar reaction from a child. This was backed up by Kimberly's colleagues at the nursery, Gillian and Vanessa, who had also witnessed this, saying that when Rachel came to pick Liam up, he looked deadpan, just staring, no smiles, and how he had looked scared each time his mum had picked him up. Kimberly explained that over the 3 months, photographs had been taken of Liam by nursery staff, which showed him playing with toys, on a slide and reading books, which the jurors were shown. And she said, in her opinion, the photos revealed that over the 3-month period, Liam's skin had grown paler, he had bags under his eyes, and he had lost weight. When these issues were raised with Rachel, she told staff that this had been caused by Liam nipping himself, going on to explain that she believed Liam could be autistic. However, following being confronted, Liam was then removed from this nursery. The next day, now the 5th of May, the jury was shown a 12-minute police crime scene video, including showing Liam's body at his house hours after he was found dead, with those sitting in the public gallery being warned that they might want to leave at this point. Although for the jury members, they had no choice but to stay and watch as the silent video recording went from room to room in the house, from the kitchen and bathroom to the living room and hallway, which showed family pictures of Liam, Rachel and Naomi displayed on the walls, before finally ending up in Liam's bedroom. Initially, the recording focused on Liam's cot and buggy, and showed Liam's toys scattered around the room, and drawings he had done on his bedroom wall, before finally Liam's body, lying on the floor of his bedroom, came into shot. At first, Liam's body is covered up to his neck with a duvet that had been placed over him by paramedics, with it looking that Liam was simply sleeping soundly. However, when the duvet was removed, Liam's grey, lifeless body was revealed. He is seen to be wearing Zingzilla's pyjamas, with his left leg bent upwards at an awkward angle where it had been broken. As the video slowly moved over Liam's body, jury members quietly wept, as did Naomi and Rachel, as well as covering their faces during parts of the recording. After the 12-minute recording stopped, one juror, with tears in their eyes, quickly raised their hand and asked Judge Lord Burns for a break. I can't imagine having to watch that video, seeing what had been, as one witness described Liam as, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, happy-go-lucky 2.5-year-old boy with a cheeky smile and his whole life ahead of him, lying dead in his bedroom, in his pyjamas, having suffered unimaginable pain and neglect. I think it would be hard for anyone's emotions not to have got the better of them in that situation. I'm sorry for being quite so descriptive, but I wanted you to know what this jury actually saw, imagine what they must have been feeling, and think about what you might have felt. So after the break, next on the stand was Police Constable Sam Gurwood, who, along with his partner, arrived at Naomi and Rachel's house on the night Liam died, following receiving a report that a baby was in cardiac arrest and may have been strangled by a young boy. PC Gurwood said that when they arrived, Rachel was standing with the boy, who Naomi and Rachel blamed for Liam's death. PC Gerwood said she had a hold of the young boy and told him to tell me what happened. He mumbled something that sounded like, "I strangled him." The young boy was then taken by the two police officers into a separate room from Rachel and Naomi, where the young boy repeated the claim again, as well as at the police station later that night. PC Gerwood said he wanted to tell me what happened. He put his hand up in the air to say he had done this to Liam. He went on to say something along the lines of Liam was getting more attention than him. Another day then came to a close, and the heavy-hearted jurors left their benches, knowing the following day they would be hearing Rachel Trelfa's police statement about what she alleged had taken place on the night Liam died. Before I tell you about that, if you were a jury member, what would you be thinking at this point? Would your mind be made up already that Naomi and Rachel had been involved in Liam's death, as well as being guilty of not getting Liam medical help with his broken thigh and arm? Or would you be undecided at this point and have questions you'd want answered? Well, there's still more to come out, so hold that thought, as on Friday the 6th of May, the end of the 4th week of the trial, statements made by 31-year-old Rachel Trelfa, or Fee, Liam's biological mother, were read out by Detective Constable Gary McMillan and Detective Constable John Murphy, who had conducted interviews with Rachel hours after Liam had died and 4 days after Liam had died, which included how she had heard a blood-curdling scream as she learned her son was dead. The statement taken and read out by DC McMillan in the hours after 2.5-year-old Liam Fee had died at his home on the 22nd of March told how Rachel said that about 7 p.m. the night Liam died, Naomi had gone to check on Liam, and seconds later she had heard her screaming. Rachel said she ran to Liam's bedroom and immediately saw he was pure white and lifeless. She said that Naomi had then called 999 and had watched as she had been urged to carry out CPR by the emergency services operator. Rachel said she then confronted the 7-year-old boy standing at Liam's bedroom door and began to scream and shake him, asking him what he had done, saying that he just looked at me and put his hands to his face. She continued by saying that he then put one hand on his mouth and the other around his neck. The hand over his nose and mouth was like he was suffocating, and the hand on his throat was like choking. Under cross-examination by Rachel's QC, DC McMillan was asked to describe the scene at the house, which he did, saying it was pandemonium. He concluded by saying he had also heard either Rachel or Naomi shouting the words evil and pervert at the 7-year-old boy, but that he couldn't remember which of them had said this. Detective John Murray then read a more detailed statement that he had taken from Rachel 4 days after Liam had died, with Rachel saying that on Saturday the 22nd of March, Naomi had gone to check on Liam after he'd been put into his room for a nap, going on to say, "I then heard Naomi screaming from Liam's room. She was screaming my name over and over. It was horrible." Rachel said she ran to Liam's room and was in shock because it happened so quick. He was pale white, limp and lifeless. She said she shouted, "What the fuck?" with Naomi shouting back, "I don't fucking know." She then said, "I saw Naomi breathing into Liam's mouth. I don't know how many times she did this. I could hear a crackling noise coming from Liam. I don't know what it was, but it will haunt me forever." She went on to say that she had shouted to the young boy who stood in the doorway and said, "What the fuck have you done?" Going on to say again that he gestured with his hands over his mouth, nose and throat, but that he didn't actually say a word at this point, with Rachel adding, "I knew by looking at him and by his face he had done something." A Detective Constable Douglas Moyes also gave evidence, saying that he had recovered items from the property that had allegedly been used to make a makeshift cage, including a fire guard, as well as a number of objects hidden within a metal bed frame, including cable ties, ropes and a chain. And that was the end of another day and another week at court. You might be wondering what about the statement Naomi had made in the hours after Liam's death. Well, that wasn't heard until the Tuesday of the following week, and Naomi wouldn't take the stand until the prosecution's case had rested. However, before we get to Naomi, on Monday, John Taylor took to the stand, where he told the court that Naomi and Rachel knew they were in trouble after Liam died. John began by telling the court that he had known Naomi and Rachel for about 4 years, and they had seen each other quite regularly up until 2013 when there had been a falling out, and they only started speaking again after Liam's death. John told the court that he had met up with Naomi and Rachel 3 days after Liam had died at a pub in Dunfermline, along with his partner Sean, where he said there hadn't been much talk about Liam, but more Naomi and Rachel expressing their anger with the boy they claimed had strangled Liam or put his hand over Liam's mouth. He said they used horrible names when talking about this boy, saying that he was a little monster and a rapist, and that he was like an animal, and that they had previously built a cage for him because of his behaviour. However, John met Naomi and Rachel again a few days later, and he said it was this weird meeting that left him feeling uncomfortable and wanting to get drunk. He said throughout this meeting, which was about 6 days after Liam had died, he felt that Naomi didn't really care. I felt sorry for Rachel, to be honest. I think at one point I said, "You'll be going to jail for neglect," to which he said Rachel replied, "Do you think we'll get a cell together?" He went on to say that they just knew there was something wrong. They knew they were in trouble. They didn't seem that bothered. It was very weird, uncomfortable. He then said that me and Rachel got really upset. I was comforting Rachel quite a lot. The court then found out, during John Taylor being cross-examined, that he was actually serving a sentence in prison at the time of the trial, having been allowed to leave to attend the trial for assaulting police officers. Next onto the stand was John Taylor's partner, Sean, who had also been at the pub with his partner John and Naomi and Rachel, and he told the court that he had known Naomi his whole life, and that they did not murder Liam, but they knew they were going to jail for neglect. He reiterated what John had said about the conversation being more around the boy Naomi and Rachel claimed had killed Liam, calling him a monster, and saying that they never wanted to see him again. Also saying that they weren't bothered. They were sort of laughing and joking that they were going to get sent to jail for neglect, saying, "Do you think we'll get the same cell together?" Stuff like that. He ended by saying that Naomi and Rachel had done an internet search on their phones about injuries that Liam had sustained when this boy had attacked Liam. Sean said that in his opinion, Naomi and Rachel didn't take Liam to the hospital for medical treatment because they didn't want this boy to get into trouble. Now don't worry, you haven't missed anything. This has not come up yet in the trial, but it will. Just remember you're hearing the evidence and witness statements as if you were on the jury, as they heard it and when. Also taking to the stand that day was Dr. Jennifer Fusaro, a community paediatrician, who said she had examined Liam in June 2013 at the request of social workers. This was following concerns being raised to social workers by the Sunshine Nursery. In the report by Dr. Fusaro, after examining Liam, she concluded that bruises and scratches to Liam could have been caused by Liam self-harming or nipping himself, which was a claim Rachel had made. When Dr. Fusaro was asked if Liam had showed any signs of being autistic, she answered, "No, absolutely not," going on to say that a diagnosis of autism under the age of 3 would be highly unusual and could only happen in very severe cases. We have heard already how Naomi and Rachel have told various people that they believed Liam's changed behaviour, including self-harming, was because he was autistic. But that was not the case, according to Dr. Fusaro. The jury were also told of medical notes family doctor Niall Garvey had logged on Liam's record following a visit, which read that Liam was displaying odd behaviour and poor speech, going on to state that he'd been told that Liam cries a lot, hides under a blanket, hurts himself by pinching his ears and scratching himself. With the notes going on to read, in view of Liam's history, health visitor has been in contact with the school nurses, as obviously there are some alarm bells regarding what is possibly going on in this household. Taking to the stand next was social worker Karen Pedler, who was a team manager with Child Protection Services at Fife Council, whose team had become involved following Liam's childminder, Heather, raising concerns in January 2013. Following a meeting between social services, police and health representatives, where concerns raised about Liam were discussed, a social worker and police officer went out to visit Rachel and Naomi at their home to discuss the concerns. only for a plausible explanation being given to how Liam had bumped his head, which was accepted by the social worker and police officer. This was following a report stating that Liam could have been pinching himself and that the marks on him did not look like adult marks. Neither the social worker or police officer actually saw Liam during this visit, but no criminal action was taken, and Liam's case would not be looked at again until June 2013, following the Sunshine Nursery raising concerns. Upon being cross-examined by Rachel's QC, it was put to Karen, "What seems to have happened here is basically, as far as Liam is concerned, this case just went off the radar." To which Karen admitted that it did, yes. She went on to explain that this wouldn't normally be the case, that this case should have been reviewed after about 4 weeks, but that this hadn't happened in Liam's case, as a social worker who had visited Naomi and Rachel had gone off on sick leave in April and nobody had picked up her work, and that it wasn't until further concerns were raised that Liam's case was reviewed. Although Mark Stewart, QC, defending Naomi, told the court that there had been ongoing social work awareness and contact with the family from January 2013 right up to the time Liam had died, but that this had resulted in no action being taken against Naomi or Rachel. There was a lot said in the newspapers about this during and after the trial, as well as a significant case review being announced. But as jurors, you wouldn't be hearing any of this until after deliberations and reaching a verdict. Next on the stand was Pauline Emsley, a wound nurse, who said that Naomi and Rachel had brought to her to be examined the 7-year-old boy they blamed for Liam's death, due to pain the young boy had in his feet. Pauline said that she had found a pressure ulcer on his toe and skin grafts very badly infected, with redness which had spread up the foot. She said that at the time, Rachel was very surprised and asked how this could have happened. I explained to her that infections do sometimes happen in children. Pauline went on to say, "I did ask when she thought the infection had started, and she said it must have just happened." Although Pauline went on to say, "I think it would have been very difficult not to notice that the feet were like that. They'd have been very painful, and it looked like the infection was well established." Pauline said following this examination, she contacted the health visitor and also the child protection advisor at the Sick Children's Hospital, saying, "I had concerns because of the initial injury. There seemed to be a delay in seeking medical advice because the wounds were very deep. And this time, it was an infection that had not been noticed." First to take to the stand the following day, Tuesday, was Police Constable Dorothy Miller, who talked the court through the statement she had taken from 29-year-old Naomi Fee 4 days after Liam's death. The statement began with Naomi saying that on the day Liam had died, his mum Rachel had gone out in the afternoon till early evening looking after her horse, and so Naomi said she had played at home with Liam and that she had played high fives with him for a while, with her saying he liked to high five, lifting his arms up and smacking palms with her. Although if you remember what Dr. French said upon conducting the post-mortem on Liam's body, he said that Liam had a broken arm and thigh and would have been in severe pain with both. She went on to say that Rachel came home about 6:15 p.m. and the pair put on some music and poured themselves a drink of vodka and fizzy orange juice. Naomi said about 6:30 p.m. they noticed that Liam, who'd been in his buggy at this point, was nodding off, and so the pair decided to put him into his room so he could have a nap in peace, shutting his door behind them. They then returned to their living room and carried on listening to music and drinking, with Naomi mentioning at this point that the 2 7-year-old boys were also in their shared bedroom playing, with the door closed. Naomi said she had then gone back to check on Liam about 7:40 p.m, although Rachel had said it was about 7 p.m, and Naomi said she noticed that Liam was still in his buggy, but that it had been moved to a different position in the room to where her and Rachel had left it. She said as she moved closer to the buggy to check on Liam, she saw him lying lifelessly in the buggy, with his face partly covered with a blanket, going on to say he was so white. She said she then pulled the blanket off him, picked up his hands, and they were floppy. "I just knew he was dead because he was so white." She went on to say that she then screamed for Rachel, "Rachel, Rachel." She said that Rachel came rushing through, took one look at Liam and screamed to Naomi to call an ambulance, to which Naomi said she then dialed 999 and took Liam out of his buggy to try and perform CPR when instructed to by the operator. Also that week, a video was shown to the jury of both Naomi and Rachel being interviewed and having the murder charge of Liam read out to them, following them being arrested in August 2014. The film shows the pair being questioned around Liam's death before Rachel is seen to be weeping as the murder charge was read out, and Naomi appeared tearful, putting her hands over her face as she was charged with Liam's murder. What would you have been thinking as a jury member watching these videos? And finally, on the 13th of May, the last witness to take to the stand before the prosecution closed its case was a police analyst who had recovered data from both Naomi and Rachel's mobile phones, which showed search engine and websites had been used to research about broken bones. One search carried out on Naomi's phone 3 days before Liam died was, "Can you die from a broken bone?" where a link titled, "Why does a broken hip sometimes lead to death?" was clicked on. Rachel had also searched that day for, "How long can you live with a broken bone?" with a link titled, "Can you die of a broken bone?" being clicked on, as well as searches being carried out for, "Will a hip fracture heal on its own?" "How long can a broken leg take to heal?" and even "morphine for children." And the day before Liam's death, Rachel had been searching for, "Can wives be in prison together?" It was also reported that Naomi had deleted 3 logged calls she had made to her mother on the evening Liam died before handing her phone over to the police. Naomi would be asked about this when she took to the stand. That was Friday the 13th of May, and the prosecution's case was rested, and the court was adjourned until Tuesday the 17th of May, the 6th week of the trial, when the defence's case would begin, and the jury would finally hear from Naomi Fee over 3 consecutive days. Before we hear about what Naomi had to say, other defence witnesses also took to the stand, including witnesses who had spent time with Liam and said they had had no difficulties with him, as well as Naomi's best friend, who said she had no problem with Naomi looking after her own son before and after Liam's death. She also wept as she described the phone call she received from Naomi telling her that Liam had died. This was about all the defence witness statements I could find, so now we'll turn to Naomi. Here's what she had to say on day 1. Again, most of the following information came from articles in the BBC News. Naomi started with background information, and this is the first time jurors would actually find out more about Naomi and Rachel's background, most of which I have already told you in part 1. She said that she began an affair with Rachel in 2010, that when Rachel became pregnant with Liam, the pair made plans to move to Scotland to start a new life together. However, when Rachel's partner Joseph found out about the affair, they sped up these plans and made a move to Glenrothes together, with 4-month-old Liam. In June 2012, the pair entered into a civil partnership. Naomi said at this time Liam's behaviour had been fine, but that she began to notice changes after this, with Liam no longer wanting to interact as much as he used to, and she said he'd started to pinch himself and pull his own hair, saying that she and Rachel were concerned about this new behaviour and found it very upsetting to see Liam self-harming and not knowing what it was and how we could stop it. Naomi stated that at this time the pair began to believe that Liam might have autism and that they had discussed this with Liam's nursery, health visitors and a doctor, going on to say, "I just had concerns. He had changed. It was like he wasn't the same little boy, so we were very concerned." She added, "Liam would freak out if it wasn't me that went into his room first. He wouldn't accept anyone coming in. He would bite his fingers, scratch himself, just get very distressed." Going on to add that Liam would put a blanket up over his face. He would get very upset. We assumed he was doing that as a barrier to having to interact with other people. Naomi then went on to say that she and Rachel had begun to have conversations about the sexualised behaviour in a 7-year-old boy they looked after, saying that had been acting in a sexualised way towards Liam. This is the same 7-year-old boy they blamed for Liam's death. Naomi went on to say that this behaviour began to escalate, and it had been putting a strain on her relationship with Rachel, saying it was causing stress for us both. Naomi said that she would punish this 7-year-old boy when he displayed sexualized behaviour by giving him lines or smacking him, insisting that any punishment given was not over an extended period of time, with Naomi mentioning that she had previously run a toddlers group in the northeast of England until she had moved with Rachel and Liam to Scotland, and that she had smacked these children in her care if they had misbehaved. She did tell the court, though, that there was never any requirement to punish Liam. When she was asked why she had punished this boy, she said the main goal was to get the sexualised behaviour to stop, and that she'd been trying to protect Liam from being sexually assaulted. Naomi was asked if she could see how this had maybe not been the best route for her to take, and instead she should have sought expert advice, to which Naomi said she would definitely do things differently today. She also mentioned that this boy had hurt Liam and caused a cut to the back of his head, and following hurting Liam, they found this 7-year-old boy trying to fashion a rope from bandages so he could abseil from the window, but that it was all because he had hurt Liam and he knew he would be punished. Naomi also denied all of the allegations against her and Rachel, including that she had ever forced children in her care to take cold showers, explaining that the shower system was just faulty and they'd all had to take cold showers at times. So that was day one, but there was more on Wednesday, with Naomi again taking to the stand. First, she was asked by her counsel to talk the court through what had happened when she had gone to check on Liam on Saturday the 22nd of March 2014. Naomi said she had gone into Liam's room and found that Liam's buggy was in a different place to where she had placed it earlier, and that Liam was very white. I picked him up by his arms and tried to make him wake up, and I screamed on Rachel. She then said she called 999 within 2 or 3 minutes tops, but already suspected that Liam was dead. Despite this, she said she put Liam on the floor and was constantly trying to get him to wake up, but that he was really white, he was lifeless, there was nothing, and that she was gutted when she realised that he wasn't coming back. I'd lost him, saying she was in complete shock and that it kills us. She was then asked by her counsel whether, in the time she was in the room with Liam, if she had ever caused him any injury or ill health by any act or deed, to which Naomi replied, no, never whatsoever, before going on to say that she had heard a child in the house say that he had strangled Liam. She was then asked, did you have any opportunity to concoct a story relating to the accusation that her and Rachel had made up a story about what had happened that night, including delaying calling emergency services until after Liam was already dead so they could hide evidence? Naomi simply replied, no. She was then asked how she felt when she found Liam, with Naomi replying, I was absolutely devastated. She then was asked, did you have any part in inflicting the fatal injuries upon Liam or any other injuries upon Liam? To which Naomi emphatically replied, no, never. There was never any reason to harm Liam at that time or any other time. She did go on to remind the court about the sexualised behaviour towards Liam by a 7-year-old boy who lived with them, as well as an incident that took place on the 16th of March, where the second 7-year-old boy who was staying at the house had been found stamping on Liam's leg before throwing him across the room. She said she noticed a massive difference in Liam the next day, with him being unable to bear weight on his leg, which prompted her to Google symptoms. Her counsel was quick to ask the next question, in the hope this would go some way to sway the jurors' minds. He asked, do you accept that in failing to obtain that treatment, you would be guilty of neglect or ill treatment? To which Naomi replied, yes, I do. I hate myself for that. Would this have swayed your opinions, if you had formed any? The next day, Naomi was on the stand again, this time being cross-examined by the prosecutor, Alex Prentice, who firstly asked why she had deleted only the 3 calls she had made to her mother on the night Liam had died, before handing her phone to the police. Naomi placed the calls to her mother at 1936, 1942 and 1944 on the night Liam had died, and these 3 calls were the only ones she had deleted. Naomi explained that she hadn't done this on purpose, that her phone was completely cracked and held together with tape. When it was put to her that it's just a bit odd that Within that cluster, these are the only 3 which are deleted. It looks odd. She just shrugged in reply and dismissed that there was anything untoward, saying that she and her mum had just been discussing a forthcoming holiday. Just to remind you that the night Liam died, Rachel's statement said that Naomi had gone to check on Liam about 7 p.m. Naomi's statement had said that she'd gone to check on Liam about 7:40 p.m. The 999 emergency call was made just before 8 p.m. and 3 calls to Naomi's mum placed at 7:36, 7:42 and 7:44 were all deleted. I can see why the prosecution thought it's just a bit odd. The prosecutor, Alex Prentice, QC, then moved on, saying, "You looked after Liam. You cared for Liam. He couldn't care for himself. He looked to you as a parent to care for him, to look out for him, to create a safe environment for him, and you thought he might die, and you did nothing." To which Naomi quietly replied, "Yes." The prosecutor continued, "That sums this case up, doesn't it? You didn't care whether he lived or died," with Naomi replying, "Yes, I did." Before being asked, "You knew that there was a risk he might die, and you allowed that set of circumstances to continue because Rachel might leave you. Is that right?" To which Naomi allegedly said this was correct, going on to explain that she and Rachel had a difference of opinion about whether they should take Liam to hospital about his broken leg and arm. Apparently, Rachel was linked to alleged abuse behaviour by another child in her care, which had resulted in social workers becoming involved, and Rachel was scared Liam might be removed from her care if they'd taken Liam to hospital. And so Rachel had told Naomi that they would not be seeking help for Liam's broken bones, and if Naomi tried, she would leave her, taking Liam with her, and that she would never see Liam again. The prosecutor quickly fired back, "He was in excruciating pain. Do you agree?" Naomi replied, "He was crying," with the prosecutor saying he desperately needed help, to which Naomi said, "I didn't know that at the time." The prosecutor then put it to Naomi, "You would rather that he writhed in pain for days than you face a question being asked?" Naomi replied, "I wouldn't rather that." "But that's what you did," Alex Prentice said, to which Naomi agreed. He went on to say, "That's a wicked and atrocious attitude to have towards a young boy," with Naomi replying, "I knew it was wrong, yes," with the prosecutor saying, "It's more than just wrong. Do you agree?" "Yes," Naomi replied, "because if you had taken him to hospital, he would be here today, wouldn't he?" With Naomi again replying, "Yes, he would." Naomi did deny the suggestion that she didn't seek help for Liam because she herself had been responsible for the injuries, but did admit that she did nothing despite thinking Liam may die, other than medicate Liam's pain using Calpol and ibuprofen. So that was Naomi. But what about Rachel? What did she have to say? Well, in all the newspaper articles I read, and there were so many, the only mention that Rachel had even taken to the stand were a few short sentences in the Scotsman on the 25th of May, which said that Naomi and Rachel had given evidence at the trial, where they told of their regret at not getting Liam medical help when they suspected he had suffered a broken leg in the days before his death. It appears Rachel may also have told the jury her movements the day Liam died, of looking after her horse for 3 hours before heading home in the evening. It was reported she too had said that she made the decision not to get Liam medical treatment when she suspected he had a broken leg, as she feared social workers would become involved and remove Liam from her care. She also apparently claimed that a 7-year-old boy, who also lived with them, had shown sexualised behaviour towards Liam in the past, and that he told her he had strangled or suffocated Liam the day he died. And that's it. That's all I could find in all the articles I read. There were no quotes from her if she did take to the stand either. There was much more from Naomi's time on the stand. All I can think is that she just repeated what Naomi had already said, and so it wasn't worth it being reported again. But it was a bit strange, and it kind of gives a wee bit weight to what Rachel's mum said in a newspaper after the trial and verdict, which I'll tell you about in part 3. So that was the end of the defence's case. Now it was time for closing statements, with the prosecutor Alex Prentice being first up on the 24th of May, and his closing statements took the whole day. He started off by telling the jury that it had been a harrowing case, and that they would need to be made of granite, not to have been affected by what they had heard, but that sympathy should play no part in their judgment. He went on to say that Naomi and Rachel had clearly acted together with a common criminal purpose, describing the case as circumstantial, although going on to say that the extent of Liam's injuries and the lack of medical assistance sought should assist the jury in working out the mental attitude of Naomi and Rachel towards Liam, and that the conduct I say is set out on the evidence in the charges suggests a course of violence and cruelty towards the children, and that there's sufficient evidence led in this case to justify the charges as they stand. The evidence is there in support of all that is on the indictment. And he urged the jury to find the accused guilty of everything that's on the indictment, and that they were entitled to do that. He went on to tell the jury, you can look at the awkward and deliberate lies and explanations that were put forward, going on to tell the 8 women and 7 men of the jury that the most obvious thing for an adult to do would be to tell a doctor, nurse, or hospital immediately the real reason for any injuries a child may have, and that if sexualized behaviour was taking place, that indicates a problem that has to be addressed. But that, no, they hide it. They never tell anyone. They never mention it until the night Liam dies. In this case, I suggest there's a clear and compelling case of the boys being ill-treated in a way that is completely unacceptable. Before resting, he said that Naomi and Rachel had shown an unyielding, heartless cruelty towards Liam, a callous indifference to Liam's suffering, and again urged the jury to return a verdict of guilty to everything that Naomi and Rachel had been charged with. So, a lot already on the shoulders of the jury members, and still they had to hear the closing statements from Naomi and Rachel's QCs, with Naomi's QC, Mark Stewart, giving his closing statement the following day, which lasted 4 hours. Naomi's counsel began by saying that Naomi accepts that she made a terrible, terrible mistake, a catastrophic mistake, by failing to seek help for Liam when she suspected he had a broken leg, which she admitted was unforgivable and cruel, but that it didn't automatically mean that she should be condemned as guilty for his death. These were 2 separate matters, and that there's not one piece of evidence offered to you that Naomi Fee ever inflicted injury on Liam Fee at all. He went on to say that, I don't suggest for 1 minute that you should sympathise with Naomi Fee, not for 1 minute, but that the evidence which the Crown hope they might have, wish they might have, suggest they might have, is actually missing, and it cannot be replaced by conjecture, assumption, and inferences. Going on to say that, I intend to put before you facts. He did this by putting it to the jury that the only person responsible for Liam's injuries and death was the 7-year-old boy who had been living with Naomi and Rachel at the time. He stated that this boy's reported behaviour and comments he had made to the police gave a clear explanation with motive for assaulting and killing Liam. He went on to say that while this fact may be unpalatable and difficult, it was this boy and this boy only who was responsible for the injuries that Liam had. He said, I don't say that because it's convenient, I say that because that's what the evidence says. He then drew the jurors' attention back to the 999 emergency call that Naomi had made, which the jurors had heard earlier in the trial, where Naomi and Rachel could clearly be heard to be in distress, which he used to reject an accusation by the Crown that Naomi and Rachel had concocted and stage-managed a story about Liam's death. He asked the jurors to remember the background noise in the emergency call, suggesting that that was what was going on in the house at the time, that Naomi and Rachel were clearly in the process of trying to save someone's life, Liam's life, not in fact in the process of stage-managing or concocting a story about his death. Naomi's QC stated that while the public were entitled to write off Naomi and Rachel, the jury members could not, as they had taken an oath to apply an open mind to all matters before them, that the Crown required to put before the jury Naomi's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, but that, I say to you, that reasonable doubt is apparent in the strong case that exists that shows the boy was the responsible party for what happened. He concluded by saying to the jury that while Naomi did deserve total condemnation of society for leaving Liam in horrendous pain with a broken leg for days without seeking medical attention for him, the jury should acquit Naomi in relation to Liam's death, as the Crown had not proven the case beyond reasonable doubt. And that was the end of the second day of closing statements. The next day would be the turn of Rachel's defence QC, Brian McConaughey, before Judge Lord Burns went through the options available to the jury in terms of the charges against Naomi and Rachel. Rachel's defence QC started by saying that while Rachel admitted neglect of Liam, as far as Rachel is concerned, there is no direct evidence against her that she assaulted Liam, going on to say that she had no motive for assaulting her son and was indeed only guilty of the unforgivable crime of failing to seek medical help for Liam when she suspected he had a broken leg in the days before his death, putting to the jury that, by failing to get medical help, his mother, Naomi Fee, committed an unforgivable crime, and in due course she would be rightly and justly punished for that. But does that make her a murderer? He told the jury to not compound that tragedy by convicting Naomi Fee of the murder of her son when there's not a shred of evidence to support that contention, going on to say that the Crown's case is one of illusion, of smoke and mirrors, and that the only real evidence was that another boy had in fact killed Liam. He concluded by asking the jury to put aside any preconceptions and prejudices they might have and to look dispassionately at the evidence in the case. Now there was only the judge's direction to the jury to hear the following day, Friday the 27th of May 2016, before the 8 women and 7 men of the jury began their deliberations. Judge Lord Burns told the jury members to act impartially and dispassionately as they considered the highly emotional case. They were informed, according to the Mirror newspaper on the 31st of May 2016, that they could return verdicts of guilty, not guilty, or not proven to the 8 charges that Naomi and Rachel faced. The judge also told the jurors that they were under no pressure and could take as long as they needed to reach a decision. And then on Friday morning, the 15 jurors headed out to deliberate on what verdict they would and should return. What would be your thoughts going into deliberations if you were a jury member on this case? Could you honestly say you would be able to keep an open mind, act impartially and dispassionately, and not have preconceptions and prejudices? I mentioned in part 1 that it took the jury 10 hours to reach a verdict. So what points would you be raising if you were in these deliberations? What questions would you be asking? Would you be playing devil's advocate and saying, what if? Or would you be sure in your verdict, feeling that the Crown had proved their case beyond reasonable doubt? Let me know your thoughts on YouTube and Spotify comments, on Instagram at Scottish Murders Podcast, or by emailing me at contact@scottishmurders.com. Part 3 will be released in 2 weeks' time, where I'll tell you what the jurors' verdicts were, what was being reported in newspapers during the trial that jurors wouldn't know about, what the outcome of the significant case review was, what various organisations and professionals felt about Liam having fallen off the radar, how this case affected at least one jury member, how someone felt they had been made a scapegoat, how Rachel's mum was annoyed that so much misinformation had been reported and that no one would print the real truth about what happened, and the new information that came to light after the trial. I'm thinking there might also be a part 4, but it won't necessarily be about Liam Fee's case specifically. After reading all I did on this case and how Liam seemed to slip through the cracks, and following the social work case review outcome and what came out afterwards, which I'll tell you about in part 3, I had a lot of questions and queries. It just so happens that I know a social worker, and so I'm hoping they will agree to speak to me, anonymously of course, so I can ask them the questions I have. So part 4 will be me reading out my questions and then the answers, if I can make that happen. If you have any questions or queries after listening to part 3 that you'd like me to ask too, again, please let me know via commenting on Spotify or YouTube, Instagram at Scottish Murders Podcast, or by emailing contact@scottishmurders.com, and I'll try and get your questions answered. Thanks for listening to another episode of Scottish Murders, the twice award shortlisted fortnightly podcast that brings to light the stories of victims and their relentless pursuit for justice. If this case has captivated you, then don't forget to tell a friend to listen or check out scottishmurders.com so together we can share more Scottish Murders. Until next time, I've been your host, Dawn.
Scottish Murders is a production of Courtroom.